Yes, we can, Bob. And let me give you a proper introduction, and I can hand over the digital stage to your good self. As you can hear, Bob is with us, and he has over 30 years of experience in award-winning sustainable architecture. Bob believes in creating designs that encapsulates the best of both worlds, both high-quality architecture and super sustainability. Bob was the designer of New Zealand's first two 10-star Homestar rated homes, after which he launched the SUPERHOME movement, a charitable trust aiming to transform homes to be healthy and sustainable, better for people and the planet. Makes sense. It's great to have you with us, Bob Burnett. Kicking off our Tulo February talk, the digital stage is all yours, sir.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and good morning, everybody. Kia ora koutou. And it's phenomenal to see so many people tuning into this and the interest that there is. So I'm going to talk to you about the superhome movement and specifically about design, the superhome design difference. And just before I do that, I just want to acknowledge the people up north and events there, and there's people that are suffering, and condolences. Being that I'm based in Christchurch, we've had our fair share of adversity, and although it's a different situation there, we know what it's like to be tipped out of our homes and have to deal with that and losing everything. Just myself, last week actually, I just received the code compliance certificate for the repairs to my house. So that's almost exactly 12 years to the day that the earthquake was. So that's ridiculous. But and that was an incredible life challenge to deal with that. So just know that even though you're suffering now, it does get better. And and also while I think of it, shout out to Guy Gillespie, Character Homes, one of the super home builders. He messaged me and said he was going up with his digger to help out. And what a super great thing to do. And so Superhome Movement, we're a charitable trust. We don't have a lot of money, but we chipped in a little bit of money just to help with gas. And I think, if we all just chip in a little bit, it's going to make a big difference to help the people in need. So, kia kaha, stay strong. So, Superhome Movement, what's a super design? What's a super home? I think it really starts with a super design. And Superhome Movement is really, our key activities around education and lobbying, both creating awareness for the community and people, just homeowners that want to build a better home, but also educating the industry. That's what the Superhome Movement's all about. It's multifaceted. And, the people involved are architects, designers, builders, subbies, suppliers, basically everybody involved in creating better homes. And they're people that are on this journey of continual improvement, and they just want to see a much better standard of living, a standard of homes in New Zealand. And so the sad thing is that in New Zealand, design is very marginalised, and so 95% of homes are just built, and they're just built to the lowest standard, the New Zealand Building Code minimum standard. And I describe that as the worst possible home that you're legally allowed to build. I think Brand's research showed a wee while ago that 5% of homes are designed by architects. Most homes are just built by large volume home building companies, and it's very much short-termism. It's very much about a race to the bottom. How cheaply can we build? And it's all about the capex and not about the opex. The ongoing costs are just not considered at all, and in terms of the running cost of the home, power cost, and other important factors. So I would argue that we're generally quite financially illiterate when it comes to housing. We're thinking about what's affordable, but it's definitely not what is the cheapest possible house to build. So that all sounds a bit negative, but I promise from now on I'm going to talk about the good stuff. And so why do we need super homes? By the end of this talk, hopefully you'll know exactly that. And what makes a super home? It's really what makes a super design, first and foremost, and then who, the super team. So I'm going to talk a little bit about who's involved in the super home movement and also how to get involved. So, and if you go to superhome.co.nz/who, you can see all of the sort of 25, 30 architects, designers, about the same number of builders, subbies, suppliers, who's involved. And like I said, these are the people that just get it and want to, on this journey of continual improvement, and want to do better. So key ethos with super homes is keep it super simple, the KISS principle, because the building code is maddeningly complex and there's a lot of challenges in the industry. I think if we can just point to simple solutions that work, that's where we're at. And the super home, what is the super home movement? I've already talked a little bit, jumped ahead a little bit there, but what we do, I'll talk more about our tours and our events. And the tours are by far our most, our flagship event and our most successful outreach to the community and the industry. And how to get involved, lastly. So I guess to describe a super home, you know, to look at it, I think to look at a case study is what we're going to do, hopefully 1 or 2 case studies. But really to get the essence and understand fully a design or a piece of architecture in general, you have to visit the home. So that's why those tours are so wonderful. I think you probably get about 10% of what a design is by looking at photographs. You really need to experience it in the flesh and, you know, get a feel for the space and that sort of thing, and understand the warmth. So we created, as you heard in the intro, we created the first 2 10-star homes, and that was really, they were the first 2 super homes. And Mia Leanne cut the ribbon there, and she said it's great that it's about more than just these 2 homes, it's about a movement, and the movement is great for the city, for the country, and actually the planet.
This is actually really important for Christchurch, for New Zealand, and actually the planet, because this is the future.
So, you know, what we do for ourselves, for our health, and, you know, to be more sustainable is obviously, you know, it's a double-edged sword. It's going to be better for the environment and lessening the impact on the environment. So after these homes were created, that was really, they were part of the first super home tour, and around 1,000 people visited those homes over the tour weekend. And later on, the tours became a full month, so each weekend for a whole month. And the busiest tours, I think 2018, 2019, we had around 10,000 people visit 10 or 12 homes, and they saw a home that is quite different to a typical building company home. And, you know, the thing about New Zealand, the New Zealand home building industry, most people decide what sort of home they're going to live in after visiting a building company show home. 80% actually decide what they're going to build. But in actual fact, they're looking at the wrong thing. They're looking at the cheapest possible home that you can build to the New Zealand Building Code standard. In most cases, they're all pretty similar. You know, they might look different from on the surface, but in terms of their technical performance, they're very similar. And like I said, 95% of homes built to the code. So on the tours, people can experience not just the look and feel, but they can understand, they can see how warm they are, the air quality, the quality of light, the acoustics, all these things, that you just don't get from looking at something on a website. So that's the beauty of the tours. They can also hear directly from the homeowners and the people involved in creating the homes, so the designers, builders, and they can ask important questions like the process of creating a super home and what it's like to live in, what's the power bill, and so and people are really open and honest and share all their information about those things and the costs involved in creating super home. So one thing that probably most people initially think is super home. That sounds really expensive. Supercar, super yacht, but that's not what it's about. It's about raising the standard and shifting the bottom end to something that is healthy and the minimum standard. So I'll talk a bit more about our base, better, best standards, and if you're on a budget, base is the minimum, and then you can do better or best if you want to go to the next step. So these are just some images of some of the beautiful homes that were on the Super Home tours. It's a really fun event too, and we also have bus tours, which are more in-depth, so people can buy a ticket, and for a day, it's a great day out. People can visit a handful of homes, lunch is provided, there's the obligatory after drinks, and it's very fun and very social, and there's some incredible learnings and connections that are made on those bus tours. So we're going to be doing a lot more bus tours, which is a really high quality experience, rather than the public tours are just self-guided. You choose which homes you want to visit and rock up. So so there was one year, 2020, we couldn't do the tours because of COVID, but 2021, 2022, we had a different format. It was just back to one weekend, but we still had around 5,000 people. And it just shows how many people are actually interested in doing something different and doing something better. And it's been really super great to get back to having in-person events. It's been difficult with COVID, but last year, end of the year, we had an expo and we had about 10 companies gave a 5-minute talk about what they do and their role in creating super homes, designers, builders, suppliers, etc. So that was super, a fun day. So I've talked a little bit about the super home participants. And what makes super, I really think it's the people. And to have a super designer, super builder, consultant, suppliers, everybody that participates, teamwork makes the dream work. And by knowing that you're dealing with people that know how to do things, how to create a super home, the details involved, it de-risks the project for you. The last thing you want is to be a guinea pig and have people learning on your project. And the other thing about a super home movement is the culture. So it's really a group of like-minded people who share the ethos and the attitude for wanting to make the next project better than the last, and that's really important. And there's no sort of professional rivalry or sort of trade secrets, sort of playing your cards close to your chest. People openly share ideas, and ultimately we're trying to shift the entire industry to a place where it's a better standard, and we're creating better homes that are healthy and energy efficient, and basically helping people create a better life for themselves. And I don't think that's overstating it, sorry. So as you'd expect, we have our sort of code of ethics, code of conduct, rules. But rule number one is don't be a dick. And unwritten rule. Unfortunately, it's not unwritten now because I've just written it down in this presentation, but it was the Tin Man that wrote that anyway, so it's not me. So a super home is really a sum of many parts, and I think of it as a system, and a system where everything works together in harmony. And I'm not just talking about a solar system, your hot water system, your ventilation system. I'm thinking about the building as a system, your window system, and how does that connect to the wall, and how does the wall connect to the floor, and those sort of things. So I think that's a good place to start, thinking about the building as a system. And Buckminster Fuller, he was a visionary, he was an architect and inventor, probably more so, and also wrote some great books, and he has some wonderful quotes, and I've stolen a couple of them for this presentation. So, and he was the guy that created the geodesic domes back in the 50s. But, when working on a problem, I'm always thinking about beauty. And, if it's not beautiful, it's wrong, but I think if it's not beautiful, it's not finished. Try harder, keep working. So, I think the combination of something that's beautiful and high performance, that's really the winning formula. And so this home here, it's really kind of, it's an older project actually, but there's some things that I sort of wanted to talk about here. It's really sort of breaking down the boundaries between the inside and outside. If we think about a building technically, it's like we're trying to separate the inside from the outside, but I think that's too simplistic. In terms of building science, that's true, and that's one thing that we've got to achieve. But also there might be different layers, and I think the Japanese call it kyokai, and a technique for articulating space and understanding boundaries, and the boundary between the inside and the outside is something that you might want to occasionally blur, and there will be different levels of opacity and transparency. There'll be light and shadow, and a lot more than just how do you keep the weather out of the building. And I think this design here that reflects that a little bit, and that this end room was really about how do we create sort of almost like an outdoor room where there's an amazing view here. So that's another thing, you might want to see what's happening, so that the house opens up and closes down in varying degrees. Another interesting thing here is that you've got different layers of shading. So you've got basically a dual eave where you've got a lower overhang to protect this area from overheating, which I think is super important. And this example here too, it has massive overhangs on the north-facing roof, because it's actually relatively easy, when we think it's quite easy, to make a house warm so that it's not going to be too cold, but it's more difficult to keep it from overheating. So that's a feature of super homes, making sure that you have the right amount of shading. And this example too has a wraparound veranda, which in Japanese is called ingawa. So you get the idea, there's a bit of a Japanese theme. So my wife and partner is a Japanese architect, and a lot of our designs are quite sort of influenced, or very influenced, and some of them are actually quite sort of Japandi, which is sort of a Scandinavian sort of integration with Japanese design, and really sharing a lot of the same principles of sort of minimalism, but also using natural materials and creating warmth, and that's sort of what probably people are referring to these days as biophilic design, how you can influence people's health and well-being through the actual using the natural materials and incorporating those into the build, into the design. So I mentioned the Base Better Best certification for super homes. About 2 years ago, we created a healthy home guide, and part of that was we created a design matrix, which is really like a at a glance checklist of, if you like, almost or guidance really on what goes into the base, better, best standards and what that means. So I think that's important because everybody's on a budget, and maybe not everybody, even though something like a 10-star passive house is where we want to be, it might not be within everybody's means to do that today. So this is a project that was recently finished in a subdivision in Prebbleton, Whare Paitara, which means wall house. And the big idea with this house, every design needs a big idea, and the big idea with this project was this spline wall that separates the public area from the private area. The bedrooms are in one side, and then the kitchen, dining, living, and a multifunction room on the other side. And this is my little jab at the 95% of homes that are built to the building code. So there's a sea of subdivision here with these gable roofs that are all grey, and the houses are all, they seem to be either white or black. But anyway, this is the floor plan. So a key to the success of this design is a really spatially aware floor plan. So it's a really good place to start, just thinking about being spatially efficient, because if, quality, not quantity, if you can create something that's really great that isn't too overly large, then you can put more into the quality with the money that you save. So you can see this wall in the middle houses some storage and a little office space, but also it has the whole home ventilation system and the ducting and the hot water cylinder. So we've got our 2 bedrooms, master bedroom, ensuite, and a shared bathroom, and then opening out to the northwest is the living area. And this is how the cross section works. So you've got these high level windows for ventilation, and there's Jetstream Max insulation in there, so we've packed as much insulation in there as we possibly can. And this house is designed to passive house standard, so it's very airtight. It's actually, they tested it and it was 0.7 air changes. The requirement for passive house is 0.6, but we think it should be relatively easy to find out where the 0.1 is and retest that. So you can see in here the space, and interesting, I went there to take some photos on the weekend, and the client, the owner, commented about the quality of light in this space and how it was really unexpected, and how they really enjoy the morning sun coming in here through those high windows and seeing the play of light and throughout the day, and are very aware of how the sun moves around throughout the day, and just generally very aware of the environment and the fact that we rely on the sun and the solar gain from the sun, but also they're collecting their rainwater and recycling the grey water. So even though they're connected to the town supply, they're thinking about, last couple of months, January, February, there's been very little rain, and they're thinking about the resources and living within our boundaries. So their power bill is $260. Their power has a $260 credit currently, and their biggest power bill is in winter was $80, but they have an electric car which goes to work every day, and that's part of that. There's a whole home ventilation system in this house, and that's really important if you have an airtight home. It's a package deal, you've got to have that. And that provides a really great quality of air. And it's something that people don't often think about because it's invisible, but the air quality in our homes is really important. And so this is another project which I'm probably not going to just talk about too much, but it was kind of inspired by a 1909 bungalow in Pendleton Road called Los Angeles House. So it's got that sort of vibe from that sort of aesthetic from the exterior, but the interior is something completely different. The interior is very much the Japandi sort of light, bright, minimalist, natural materials. A lot of wood and stone, and once again a very carefully thought out sort of quality of light and shade and protection from the harsh summer sun. So if there's actually, that was on last year's tour, so if you want to see all about that project, you can go to the website bbarc.com, or it's also on the ArchiPro, and the video's linked there, with a 20-minute talk with the people and what on the tour. So just a few current projects and projects coming up. We've been asked to design a chain of planet positive hotels, luxury hotels in Europe, and a very interesting job. So 80%, and just part of the research and sort of starting to look at this, it's just at the very beginning, 80% of guests booking accommodation are seeking a more sustainable hotel if it's available. And so I was in Japan in January, and I actually stayed in a hotel called SUPERHOME, but I think it was really more about the name. It was kind of, the aesthetics were a little bit interesting and sort of employing those sort of biophilic elements, but I'm not sure if it was entirely super efficient in terms of the energy efficiency and things like that. Our next demonstration project, it's not this. So this is a super reno. So this is the home that I was started renovating prior to getting back into my home after the earthquakes, after it was repaired. And so that was interesting in itself, but this home is going to be removed from this site, and there's going to be 4 units, a carbon negative multi-residential demonstration project. So sort of much like the 10-star, the 2 10-star homes, this will be hopefully creating awareness about how to do multi-residential to a much better standard, so that it's carbon negative and energy positive, and all the other good things that make a super home. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the building code now, and hopefully I don't get too negative, because most people probably know what I think of the building code, and it's still pretty lousy, even though they've made a few little changes. So Bucky, again, his quote, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." Well, I think that is a really useful sentiment with the building code. Our building code is never going to be, basically building codes don't work, and New Zealand has a particularly bad one. So it's never going to be good enough, it's never going to change fast enough. And one of the problems is just this here, in the latest Build magazine, the complexity of the regulatory environment is driving behaviours and decisions across the building system that are risk averse, conservative, and not conducive to innovation. I think it's actually worse than that. I actually think that building code is stymieing innovation, and most people just go to the acceptable solutions in the building code because they fear if something goes wrong, then they'll be in the gun. And this whole mentality of being conservative, being risk averse, is really unhelpful in stopping innovation. So on one hand, we've got no innovation from the consumer and the building companies, because they're just repeating the problems of the past and building to code. On the other hand, we've got this regulatory system that is also not conducive to innovation. So it's kind of a perfect storm in a way. So building code, we initially thought, okay, 6.6 value in the ceiling, that's pretty good. They've put a beanie on the house, but you can still be, what's the point in having a beanie and still being in your singlet and your undies? We need to deal with the whole home and think about the walls and think about air tightness, eliminating thermal bridges. And if you have air tightness, like I've already mentioned, you need proper whole home ventilation. There's no requirement for air tightness. There's no requirement for proper ventilation. It's basically open the window. It doesn't work. So, and then, if you read the fine print, everybody was sort of freaking out about the thickness of the insulation and how that's going to fit in the roof. But then there's a half a metre gap at the edges that is allowable to still have the old level of insulation, which is half. So it's not really a beanie, it's more like one of these little skull caps here that the Pope wears. And a yarmulke, I think that's called. But anyway, air tightness is so important in the New Zealand climate. So, if you think about a high performance home, passive houses live around here, the bottom axis, x-axis here is the air tightness, and the energy use, the space heating demand, which is effectively the energy use, is on the vertical axis. So, one air change. We think like a super home, a good standard for best is about one air change. 15 kilowatts per square metre, that's actually the passive house standard. And in Christchurch climate, if you look at the red line here, Christchurch, if you go up to 30, which is double the amount of energy, you've got 3 more air changes. So this is showing the incredible importance of air tightness and the effect that that has on the thermal performance and the energy use. So just thinking about insulation is really flawed. You really need to think about how's that insulation going to be airtight, and it's going to work much better. So we have our details for windows, walls, floors, and the key thing with the window is installing it properly into the warm part of the wall. So the pink part here is the warm part of the wall, and the blue is the cold cladding cavity. So the image on the right is still how you, and even with the building code changes and improving the standard of the actual windows, they're still able to be installed in the cold cavity, which the rest of the world stopped doing decades ago. So, there's obviously, there's quite clever people at MB and consulting on this, but it's sort of biggest belief that they can't understand that it's important to have a high performance window installed in line with the insulation in the warm part of the wall. So my view is that if you're spending more on better windows, you might as well get or it's essential actually to get the full advantage of that instead of having them still in the cold part of the wall. If you do install the windows properly, as per this image here, you can get rid of this big chunky piece of aluminium. It's called a wand support bar, and that's a huge thermal bridge. It's a aluminium is the probably 5th most conductive material known to man. So even if you do have a thermally broken aluminium window, the bit that's supposed to be on the warm side or in the warm part is still going to be exposed to the cold. So that kind of, in my view, defeats the purpose a lot. In this example here, we've got a PVC window, which is non-conductive, timber non-conductive, but timber is a lot more expensive. So even a thermally broken aluminium window installed properly is going to work much better. So in a way, we're actually being told to spend more money on something, which is a bit of a fallacy, you know, and it's not going to perform as well as it could do and should do. So now I think it's really important that we understand the performance of our designs while we're designing them. So, you know, we've been energy modelling what we do for a couple of decades, and we were early adopters of this. So this is a graph from ArchiCAD, which is the CAD program that we use, but it actually has energy analysis built into the program. It's just, I've never met anyone that actually uses it. And, you know, originally it was an add-on program called Eco Designer. And back then, you know, 15, 20 years ago, we used that program and explored what that can do inside the CAD package. So I think modelling a design after it's completed and giving it to a consultant to do that can sometimes be an eye-opener, but I think by far the best time to get the information about the energy use and the thermal performance of a design is at the very early design stages when you can make changes. You know, there's little point in knowing what the problems are after your client's already fallen in love with a design, and you know, it's hard to come back from that and make changes unless they're really really committed to doing that. So integrating, I think this is the future, so integrating the analysis into the workflow so that we've got tools that are allowing us to work smarter, not harder, and have the data at our fingertips when we need it. I think it's really like, it's kind of like you could have a energy nerd on your team in your office full time if you had that capability. So just another thing that this is pretty old now, and this is an idea that I had quite a long time ago, but and a super app, and I think, you know, even though we haven't, it's still just an idea. We haven't created this app because you know, we've applied for funding, but not it hasn't been picked up. But I think it's really useful as it describes really in essence what a super home is all about. So you know, this is actually a slice through the first super home, the first 10-star home, and you know, if you can imagine this as an interactive 3D model, and you can make changes. You know, you can put some solar panels on, or increase the number of solar panels, or change the windows from double to triple glazing, etc., etc. And then you can see what the energy consumption is, what the performance is, what the carbon footprint is in terms of the embodied carbon as well. The financial data, what's the power bill, what's the monthly power bill, and then what's the build cost, and how does that change as you make these iterations and look at exploring these different options. So I think that would be really, really useful. And then the last piece is what would happen if you put the money that you save, if you had a house like the Whare Paitara house where you had no power bill, it was energy positive over the course of the year. What would happen if you put everything that you spent on your power onto your mortgage? It would have a substantial impact on your financial position. It could reduce the term of the loan from 20 to 15, 10 years maybe. It could save you many, many thousands of dollars depending on the size and cost of the home. And then the last piece really is what's the end property value. So again, you know, people don't think about this, but if you do spend sort of 5 or 10% more on the home and it sells for 20% more, or it's worth 20% more, you're building better equity. And this home here, we kept this, there was a single story and a 2-story home. We kept this one as our office, and we just sold it about 1.5 years ago, and we were really pleasantly surprised. It reached a much higher price than we expected, probably 20% more than what we were expecting. And a lot of that was due to the real intense interest that people had in the performance of the home and those super home attributes. So, you know, you only get that if you sell it, but it's good to know that it's a wise investment long term. I'll just finish with these are some of the reading that I'm doing at the moment. You know, I mentioned the one on the right, Hyokai, the Japanese technique for articulating space, and it is fascinating. You know, in a way, it's sort of reading this is kind of explaining what we've been doing to me. You know, the Japanization of our design. It's almost been like a subliminal thing, because I've spent a bit of time in Japan and I've understood their techniques, and it's quite an eye-opener and quite different. But these two books on the left, the one in the middle and the one on the left, Bruce King, he's a great writer, and it's a really easy read. And you know, the latest one is Build Beyond Zero, and you know, we really must do better than targeting carbon zero by 2050. You know, that's too long, and I have no doubt that we're not going to get there. You know, I think we need to aim high and be bold, and you know, have some audacious goals. And if we go beyond zero, produce something that is actually carbon negative, and buildings that act as a carbon filter and extract carbon out of the environment, whether that's the materials that we're using that are carbon sequestering materials, or whether that's in the design and how they're put together. And just simple things like reducing the amount of waste. You know, there's a phenomenal amount of waste in the building industry. It's a very dirty business. A lot of it is entirely unnecessary, just with a little bit more thought. So there's some simple things that we can do, and you know, it starts with energy efficiency, and we haven't even got that sorted in New Zealand, unfortunately, but the rest of the world is a decade or two ahead of us on that. But you know, once you've got a more energy efficient building, the embodied carbon becomes more significant once you've dealt with that. So we've got a long way to go, and I think now I might just open it up for questions and stop sharing my screen.